The whole town told her the woods were cursed, and tonight she finally understood why. A broke, single mom scraping by in the frozen streets of Duluth, Minnesota took a chance on a $1,200 abandoned winter cabin, her last hope for shelter for her 3 young children. She thought she was just buying 4 walls to survive the storm. But on their first night inside, her youngest heard a hollow echo beneath the living room floorboards. And when their rescue dog began scratching frantically at the seams in the wood, they uncovered a hidden trapdoor that hadn't been opened in decades. What waited below wasn't just an old basement. It was a secret someone in Duluth had tried to bury, a secret tied to her family, to a forgotten promise, and to a danger the whole town had been quietly afraid of for years. The moment she lifted that hatch, she realized the cabin wasn't abandoned. It had been watching, waiting, and calling her home for a reason that would change everything she thought she knew about her past, and about who was really trying to take this place from her. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. It's incredible to see how far these stories travel. A steel gray winter pressed over Duluth, Minnesota, the wind sweeping in from Lake Superior like a blade honed by decades of storms. The cold clung to every surface, bit at exposed skin, and turned each breath into a small cloud that vanished almost as quickly as hope. Amber Collins stood on the cracked concrete of an old bus stop shelter, her arms wrapped tightly around her 3 children, as if her body alone could shield them from the freezing world around them. Amber, 32, was a thin woman, with the kind of weary beauty that hardship never managed to steal entirely. Her long brown hair, usually tied back neatly, clung damply to her face beneath the frayed hood of her coat. Sharp cheekbones hinted at weight she had once carried but lost over years of struggle, and her pale skin was reddened by the relentless Minnesota winter. Her hazel eyes, normally gentle, normally full of quiet determination, now flickered with a mixture of fear and exhaustion that she tried desperately not to let the children notice. Noah, the eldest at 10, stood close beside her. His small shoulders squared in the way only a child forced to grow up too early could manage. He had a serious expression, dark brown hair like his mother's, and a protective instinct that wrapped around his younger siblings even tighter than Amber's arms did. Grace, 7, pressed herself against Amber's side, her light blonde curls poking out from beneath a knit hat someone had donated months earlier. Grace was gentle by nature, soft-spoken and imaginative, the kind of child who whispered stories to herself when the world felt too loud. Eli, 4 years old, sat in Amber's lap, his tiny fingers gripping the sleeve of her coat. He had wide blue eyes full of innocence and confusion. He didn't understand why they weren't going home tonight, why Mommy looked like she was trying not to cry, why their bags were all they had left. The storm 2 nights before had frozen the pipes at the laundromat where Amber worked. The owner, a stern man with little patience and even less empathy, had let her go with nothing more than a stiff nod. No hours meant no paycheck. No paycheck meant being unable to pay the fee at the church shelter. And now here she was sitting on a metal bench that sucked heat from her body while the wind howled like a living thing. Amber pressed her lips against Eli's hair, inhaling the faint scent of soap lingering from the last time she had been able to give the children a proper bath. Panic fluttered weakly beneath her ribs, an instinct fighting to break free of the calm mask she wore for her children. She wanted to scream, to curse the winter, to curse life for bending her until she felt close to breaking. But she stayed silent because Noah kept looking at her as if she were the last safe thing in the world. The wind whistled through the gaps in the rusted shelter, lifting old flyers that flapped weakly on the bulletin board job postings, long, outdated missing pet posters bleached by the weather and community events from months ago. Duluth at night felt hollow, the streetlights glowing through falling snow like distant stars blurred by tears. Amber wanted to stand and walk anywhere somewhere warm, but her legs felt numb, and the children were too cold to keep moving. She hugged them closer, her breath trembling as she whispered, "We'll be okay. I promise." She wasn't sure she believed it. Footsteps crunched over ice. Amber straightened defensively, instinctively shifting Noah and Grace behind her. A man approached the collar of his heavy brown parka dusted with snow. He moved with a slight limp as if one leg carried an old injury. When he stepped under the dull yellow street lamp, Amber saw his face clearly. Harold Whitman, the local social worker, was a stout man in his late 50s with graying hair and a bristly beard that softened his otherwise stern appearance. Deep lines carved around his eyes and mouth suggested years of listening to stories full of pain and hardship. His kindness was quiet, not showy, a man who had seen too much suffering to waste time pretending the world was gentle. "Amber," he asked, his voice low and warm, clouding white into the frigid air. Amber swallowed, embarrassed by her situation despite knowing Harold never judged. "Yes," she managed. Harold nodded and reached into the inside pocket of his coat. His gloved hands shook slightly from the cold as he pulled out a weathered envelope sealed with a thick strip of clear tape. "Someone left this at the office," he said. "Asked me to make sure you received it. Said it was important." Amber blinked, unsure what to say. She didn't know anyone who could afford to send her anything important. She hesitated before taking the envelope, her fingers stiff from the cold. "Do you know who sent it?" "No name," Harold replied gently. But it looked personal, not from a charity or agency. He paused, studying her face the way someone does when trying to see if a person is truly all right. "You doing okay? Need a ride to the warming center?" Amber forced a small smile. "We'll manage." Harold didn't push her. He never did. He nodded once firmly, then walked off into the thickening snow, his limp more noticeable as he moved away. Amber sat still for a long moment before sliding a finger under the edge of the tape. Inside the envelope was a folded map, hand-drawn, detailed, and marked with a red X far north of the town center. Her breath caught when she saw the handwriting on the corner of the map. She recognized the looping letters instantly. It was her mother's. With trembling hands, she unfolded the second paper. A single line stared back at her. "Go to this place. It's my final gift to you." The world fell away for a moment. Snowflakes melted on her cheeks, though she wasn't sure if some were tears. Her mother had died 2 years earlier, lung disease, a slow decline filled with regret and half-finished conversations. Amber had thought all the secrets died with her. But this felt like a door opening in the middle of a locked life. She looked up at Noah, whose brows furrowed with worry. "Mom, what is it?" She pulled him close. I think Grandma left us something." The words felt impossible, unreal, hopeful in a way she was almost afraid to believe. The wind howled across the empty street, but inside Amber's chest, something small and warm flickered back to life. Maybe this night wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something she never dared imagine. And as she pressed the map to her chest, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever waited at that red X was the only chance they had left. The forest swallowed their path as the snowfall thickened, each flake drifting down like a quiet reminder of the world they were stepping into, a world untouched, forgotten, and waiting. Amber Collins walked at the front, her boots sinking into soft layers of white powder with each step. Her breath formed faint clouds that dissolved instantly into the icy morning. She kept one hand firmly on Eli's small mittened fingers while Noah and Grace trudged ahead, their laughter faint but real, woven into the quiet hush of the pines. Amber's heart beat faster each time she glanced toward the faint red X circled on the fragile map. Something inside her chest, something she had not felt in a long time, throbbed with a nervous and fragile hope. Noah walked several paces ahead. The boy's thin frame wrapped in a jacket far too light for Minnesota winter. His steps steady despite the cold. His dark hair, already dusted with snow, framed a face set in determination. He kept glancing at the trees, alert like a young guardian watching for danger. Grace trudged alongside him, holding a broken twig like a magic wand, the soft fluff of her blonde curls bouncing beneath her knit hat. Eli sat perched on Amber's hip now, his little legs growing tired from the long walk, his blue eyes wide with curiosity and an innocence she cherished more than anything in the world. The woods around them were a cathedral of towering pines, their branches bowed beneath the weight of untouched snow. Amber could hear nothing but the wind pushing softly through the treetops and the crunch of their steps below. The world felt ancient here, sacred, as though her mother's hand was guiding them with each turn. Only when the trees finally parted did Amber's breath hitch sharply in her throat. There it was, the cabin. Half hidden beneath a blanket of snow and framed by towering evergreens, the house looked like it had been built straight from the bones of the forest, weathered logs darkened from decades of storms, windows dusted over in frost. The stone chimney showed no smoke, but its bricks stood tall and uncracked, stubbornly clinging to the sky. Amber's knees weakened as she stared at it. Something in the way the cabin sat solid, quiet, unyielding, felt like a promise her mother had waited years to fulfill. "Mom," Noah whispered, standing beside her now. "It's real." "Yes." She breathed, heart-swelling. "It really is." They approached the narrow porch, its wooden boards old but sturdy. Amber brushed snow off the front door handle. Her hand trembled as she turned it. The hinges groaned, long, unused, but not resisting, as if the cabin were exhaling its first breath in years. Inside, the chilly air held the faint scent of cedar dust and something softer, something familiar. Not quite perfume, not quite smoke. A memory of her mother. The interior was dim at first, winter light filtering through the frost-layered windows. Amber stepped inside cautiously, Eli clinging to her shoulder. The living room felt like time had paused within it. A wooden rocking chair sat near the fireplace, a knitted quilt folded neatly over the back. Each thread faded but lovingly made. A woven rug lay across the floor, edges frayed, patterns dull, yet intact. Noah ran a hand over a small shelf filled with mismatched wooden toys. Tiny, carved animals. A train with missing wheels. A set of wooden blocks smoothed by countless little hands. Amber's breath caught. "Mom used to make toys like these," she whispered. Her voice wavered as gentle warmth spread through her chest. Grace picked up a wooden bird, running her thumb along its painted wing. "Did Grandma make this too?" Maybe Amber said, her throat tightening. "She used to carve birds. She said they carried prayers." Eli reached toward another toy, a wooden rabbit with one ear broken. Amber knelt, letting him take it. His little fingers traced the rough edge where the ear had snapped off. Something in that small gesture pressed into Amber's heart like a soft ache. She walked toward the small kitchen and stopped when she saw a tin box sitting alone on the worn counter. It was the same type of tin her mother used to keep her sewing needles in, little containers that smelled of lavender and metal. With a shaky breath, Amber opened it. Inside lay a small, leather-bound notebook with her mother's handwriting across the front for Amber. Her vision blurred with tears. She lifted the notebook gently, afraid it might crumble, despite its well-kept condition. The first page contained her mother's words written in looping letters. "I fought for this place so one day you and your children would not have to fight to survive." A sob rose in Amber's chest, sharp and sudden. She pressed a hand to her heart, reading silently. "This cabin is yours, my love. I saved every dollar I could, took every extra shift, argued with every lawyer who tried to take it away. I wanted you to have something that could not be taken from you. A home. A place where you could breathe again." Amber closed the notebook, her body trembling, as though the cold finally seeped into her bones. But the cold wasn't what shook her. It was the weight of her mother's sacrifices Amber had never known, never asked for, sacrifices the world had hidden in silence. Noah appeared at her side, his face, serious eyes wide with a mix of awe and longing. "Mom, are you crying?" She laughed shakily and wiped her cheeks, just a little. "Because Grandma made this for us." "Yes," she whispered, "because she never stopped trying to protect us." Noah nodded solemnly, the maturity in his gaze far beyond 10 years. "We'll take care of it for her." That promise warmed her like fire. Grace and Eli ran toward the wooden staircase at the far end of the cabin. "Can we look upstairs?" Grace asked, excitement lighting her face for the first time in weeks. "Go ahead," Amber said gently, smoothing Grace's curls. The children dashed up the stairs, their small footsteps echoing through the cabin. Amber followed slowly, a deep ache of gratitude swelling in her chest. The upper floor was brighter, warmed by a skylight dusted with frost. A cozy loft stretched across the cabin's second level. But what stunned Amber most were the 3 small beds lined neatly along the wall, each crafted from pine, each with a handmade quilt folded at the foot. Amber inhaled sharply. Her mother had prepared these. Grace immediately ran to the middle bed and sat down giggling as the old springs creaked. Eli climbed into the smallest bed, Wooden Rabbit still clutched tightly in his hand. Noah stood beside the loft railing, quietly absorbing it all. For the first time in so long, Amber saw her children's faces glowing, not from cold but from joy. Hope blossomed inside her, slowly, cautiously, like a flower daring to push through snow. She sank onto the edge of the nearest bed, pressing her palm against the smooth pine frame, feeling the years of effort and love worked into the wood. They had a home. A real home. She lifted her gaze toward the frost-covered skylight, imagining her mother somewhere beyond watching. "Thank you," Amber whispered. A soft breeze drifted through the cabin from the open downstairs doorway, carrying with it a sense of something shifting, something old and patient awakening around them. This place had been waiting. For them. For this moment. And for the first time in months, Amber allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, their luck had finally begun to change. Night settled over the woods in a deep, icy hush, the kind of cold that seemed to tighten the very air around the cabin. Snow drifted steadily past the windows as faint moonlight spilled through the frost, dressing the small home in a pale, silent glow. Amber Collins stood at the front porch with a worn broom in her hand, sweeping away the fresh layer of snow that had built up along the boards. Her breath curled upward in white spirals as she worked, the quiet of the night wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. She wasn't used to silence anymore, true silence, the kind that wasn't filled with city noise or shelter chatter or the clatter of laundromat machines. Here, the only sound was the steady sweep of her broom and the distant sigh of wind through the pines. Inside, the children's voices mixed with the gentle crackle of a small fire Noah had built earlier. Though the cabin had been cold when they arrived, the heat now warmed the wooden walls enough to chase away the worst of the winter's bite. It was the first time Amber felt safe in months. But safety, as she was about to learn, carries shadows. As Amber finished her sweeping, she heard a sudden, sharp sound from inside. Not loud, but distinct, like metal striking wood. She turned quickly, heart-thumping. "Mom?" Noah's voice rang out urgent, but not frightened. She hurried in, brushing snow from her sleeves. Noah stood in the center of the living room, a thin boy with serious dark eyes and a posture that belonged to someone far older than 10. His hair was tousled from play and his cheeks still pink from the fire's warmth. Grace clung to his sleeve, her blonde curls bouncing nervously while Eli stood behind both of them, thumb in his mouth, clutching the wooden rabbit he refused to let go of. Noah pointed toward the middle of the room. "There. Listen." Amber stepped closer, kneeling toward the wooden floorboards. For a moment, there was only the faint crackle of the fire. Then clang. A dull, metallic echo, faint but unmistakable, hummed from beneath the boards. Amber's skin prickled. "Where did you hear it first?" she asked softly. Noah motioned toward the area near the old woven rug. "I was rolling the toy train, and when it hit that spot, something clicked." Amber took a slow breath and lifted the rug. A cloud of dust puffed upward. With the edge of her sleeve, she swept away years of grit. And then she saw it, a thin seam between two boards barely visible unless one knew where to look. She hesitated for a second, fear and curiosity tangling inside her. Then she slid her fingernails into the seam and pulled gently. The board lifted with surprising ease. Beneath it lay a darkness so cold it seemed to breathe up at her. The children huddled closer. Amber fumbled for the flashlight she'd found in a drawer earlier. When she clicked it on the beam, cut through the shadows, revealing what lay below a staircase steep and narrow descending into a hidden cellar untouched by time. The air rising from the hole was icy, as though the cold came not from the earth but from something older, something that had waited in the dark for too long. With one last glance at her children, whose wide eyes reflected both fear and awe, Amber descended carefully, each wooden step creaking beneath her weight. The flashlight's beam caught on dust motes that hung motionless in the air, disturbed only by her breath. The cellar was larger than she expected, its low ceiling supported by thick wooden beams. Old crates sat stacked in the corners, and a workbench lay against the far wall, covered in tools so rusted they seemed more like relics than anything useful. But it wasn't the crates or tools that froze Amber in place. It was the wooden pillar near the center of the room. At chest level, carved directly into the beam with a blade, were words that made her heart stumble. "If you are reading this, be wary of the man in town." She stepped closer, raising the flashlight. Near the carved warning was something that made her knees weaken, a small handprint pressed into the wood, once stained with paint or ink, but now faded to a dark shadow. Amber's breath hitched. She recognized the shape immediately. It was her mother's. She reached out instinctively, her fingers hovering over the outline as if touching it might pull her mother back through time. Mom Grace's voice floated down from above. Amber swallowed hard. "It's okay," she called shakily. "Just stay there for now." But she didn't feel okay. An invisible weight settled on her chest, heavy and suffocating. Her mother had been here recently enough that someone might still come looking for what she'd hidden, and she had left a warning. A warning about a man. The beam of Amber's flashlight swept across the cellar again and caught on a stack of papers shoved beneath the old workbench. She knelt, pulling them out carefully. The edges were yellowed and brittle, some pages torn but still legible. Property deeds, old correspondence, receipts of payments, legal notices, each page marked with a date, each tied to the cabin. Her mother's signature repeated again and again across the documents. A tremble passed through Amber's fingers. She felt like she was touching the remnants of battles she never knew her mother had fought, quiet wars waged with paperwork persistence and whatever strength a single woman could muster. Then she found the final sheet. A small note written in the same looping handwriting from the notebook upstairs. "He wants this cabin, but I will keep it for you, no matter the cost." Amber's breath caught. She nearly dropped the paper. A chill wound its way up her spine, colder than any winter wind. Who was he? And how far had he gone to try to take this place? The cellar suddenly felt smaller, the dark corners deeper, the silence pitch black. Noah called from above, "Mom, do you see anything?" She exhaled slowly, gathering the papers and pressing them against her chest. "Yes," she said quietly, voice trembling with truth she wasn't ready to share. "A lot." When she climbed back up, Noah helped her close the floorboard. Grace immediately wrapped her arms around Amber's waist, trembling. Eli stared at her with big questioning eyes. Amber forced a reassuring smile she didn't truly feel. "It's just an old storage space," she lied, softly touching Noah's cheek. "Nothing to worry about." But as she looked toward the cabin windows dark except for the flicker of the firelight, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone out there knew exactly what lay beneath her floor. Someone who wanted it. Someone her mother had feared. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by her children and the fragile walls of their newfound home, Amber felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not despair, not exhaustion, but an uneasy sense that danger was already on its way. Morning arrived, wrapped in a sharp, crystalline stillness, the kind of calm that comes only after a heavy Minnesota storm has spent the night raging through the pines. The snow outside the cabin lay smooth and untouched, glittering like crushed diamonds beneath the pale winter sun. Amber Collins opened the front door cautiously, her breath forming thin clouds as she stepped onto the porch. She scanned the tree line, still uneasy from the message left in the cellar. The world seemed deceptively peaceful. Inside, Noah was tending the fire as he often did, already acting like the protector of the family while Grace and Eli played quietly with the wooden toys their grandmother had carved years ago. Amber took a deep breath of the cold air, feeling momentarily safe, until she heard the sound of an engine grinding through the snow. A pickup truck emerged between the trees, a large, battered Ford with faded red paint and rust chewing away at the edges. Amber's unease sharpened. The truck came to a halt right in front of the cabin. The door swung open. A man stepped out. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with a thick frame built from decades of labor, not gym vanity. His shoulders were wide beneath a heavy brown jacket lined with shearling, and his boots were scuffed from years of use. His face was angular, sharp in the way mountain rock could be weathered skin, cheeks reddened from the cold, a strong jaw partly hidden beneath several days' worth of uneven stubble. His eyes were a flat, stormy gray, the kind that didn't soften even when he smiled. And he did smile, a small, crooked curl of the lip that suggested he found amusement where no one else would. Mourning, he called out his voice, rough like gravel, but with a strange, forced friendliness. "You must be Amber Collins." Amber stiffened. "Yes. Who are you?" The man stepped closer, snow crunching beneath his boots. "Rick Dalton," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the woods as if they belonged to him. "Own a good chunk of land around these parts." Rick was likely in his late 40s, though the deep lines etched into his forehead made him look older. His hands, bare despite the cold, were large and scarred, especially across the knuckles. Not the scars of someone who worked with tools, but of someone who'd been in fights. Many of them. "What can I help you with?" Amber asked cautiously. Rick's smile widened just a fraction. "Actually, I'm here to help you," he said, casually, leaning against his truck as though settling into his favorite pastime, troublemaking. "See this cabin? It belongs to me now. Your mother. God rest her soul. Didn't finish paying off the final amount." Amber felt her stomach drop. "That can't be right." "Oh, it's right," Rick replied, tapping a gloved finger on the side of his truck as though he were bored. "Which means you and the little ones need to start packing. These winters out here aren't friendly to folks who don't know the land. Best you head back into town." Fear tightened around Amber's heart like a fist. He was the man her mother had warned her about. He was the one who wanted the cabin. The cellar message echoed inside her mind. "Be wary of the man in town. I'd like to see proof," Amber said, finally surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Rick's expression flickered barely, but enough to reveal irritation. "You don't need proof," he said, dismissive. "You just need to do the smart thing and move along." Amber swallowed hard. "I'm not going anywhere until I verify what you're saying." Rick's smile vanished, then replaced by a cold, quiet stare. He stepped closer, his shadow brushing over her boots. "You're new around here," he murmured. "You don't understand how things work. Folks who don't listen to warnings." He paused, letting the threat linger in the icy air. "They don't last long in these woods." Before Amber could respond, he stepped back, adjusting his jacket. "I'll give you tonight," he said. "Tomorrow morning, I expect this place cleared out." He tapped the side of his truck twice, then climbed in. The engine roared to life. Amber watched him pull away snow spraying from the tires. Her pulse hammered wildly. Inside, Noah was waiting by the window. Who was that man, he asked, his voice smaller than usual. Amber hesitated. She didn't want to frighten the children, but Noah was sharp, far sharper than other boys his age. "Someone who thinks the cabin belongs to him," she said softly. "But Grandma left it for us," Grace whispered, stepping toward her, worry knotting her brows. "Does that mean he wants to take it away?" Amber knelt, pulling Grace into her arms. "Not if I can help it," she said. But fear scraped at her throat. Nightfall came early in winter. By 6 o'clock the woods had already swallowed the light. Amber had locked every door and window, sliding chairs beneath doorknobs the way she remembered her mother doing when they lived in a bad neighborhood. The children were tucked onto the couch, wrapped in quilts, reading stories by lamplight. Noah stayed awake, though his eyes drifting constantly toward the windows. Amber stroked his hair. "Try to sleep," she murmured. "I'll keep watch." Even as she said it, she heard something outside, the crunch of snow under slow, deliberate footsteps. Then, Coda, the stray dog Grace had found earlier that afternoon, a medium-sized mutt with thick white and brown fur, amber eyes, and a bushy tail, lifted his head. Coda was young, maybe a year old, with the lean frame of a dog who'd been wandering too long without a proper home. Yet his spirit was unbroken. He wagged his tail endlessly at the children and nudged his head into their hands for affection. But not now. His posture stiffened. A low growl rumbled in his chest. He stood, hackles raised, tail. Rigid, alert, protective, afraid. Noah moved to the window. "Mom," his voice trembled. "He's back." Amber's heart dropped. Outside, cutting through the darkness, a beam of light swept across the snow, the sharp, white glow of a flashlight. Rick Dalton walked slowly around the cabin perimeter, his breath fogging the air. He checked each window, each corner, each doorway like a wolf circling a sleeping herd. Coda barked, explosive, frantic. Rick paused, turning his flashlight toward the sound. His eyes narrowed. For a tense moment, he stood there studying the house as though deciding where he might force his way in if he wanted to. Then, slowly he walked back toward the trees, disappearing into the night. Amber rushed to check every lock twice over. Her hands shook so badly she could barely turn the bolts. Finally, she returned to her children, pulling all three into her arms. Grace cried softly. Eli hid his face in Amber's shoulder. Noah clenched his jaw, swallowing his fear the way he always did. Amber held them tight, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. But one thing was certain: her mother had been right. Someone dangerous wanted this cabin. And after tonight, Amber understood that whatever battle her mother had fought, it wasn't over. Morning broke slowly over the frozen wood, sunlight stretching across the snow, as though testing whether it was safe to return after the long, anxious night. The cabin felt heavier than usual, not because of the cold, but because of everything Amber Collins now knew: her mother's warning carved into the cellar beam, the documents hinting at a battle she never spoke of, and Rick Dalton's dark silhouette lingering outside like a shadow that refused to loosen its grip. Amber rose before the children, woke, her hair still tangled from sleep, her eyes swollen from a night spent listening for footsteps that never came. She stood at the window and watched the frost glitter on the trees while Coda, curled beside the fireplace, lifted his head and studied her quietly. The young dog, white and brown coat, thick as winter fur, amber eyes, keen and intelligent, seemed to sense her unease. He patted over and pressed his forehead gently against her leg. Amber knelt, burying her fingers into his warm fur. "Thank you for waking us last night," she whispered. "We needed you." Coda wagged his tail, once a soft thump against the wooden floor, as if acknowledging his new role as guardian. When the children stirred, Amber quickly warmed water on the stove and helped them bundle themselves in extra layers. The moment they finished breakfast, she gathered the flashlight, a notebook, and the courage she'd held back the night before. She turned to Noah, who watched her with his serious, too wise eyes. "I need you with me," she told him, "just to hold the light." Noah nodded without hesitation. At 10 years old, he already carried the protective instincts of a grown man. His face was still soft with youth, but determination sharpened the edges of his expression. The boy had endured too many nights in shelters, too many moments watching over his siblings while Amber worked late. Duty came naturally to him now. Grace took Eli to play upstairs while Amber and Noah lifted the loose floorboard once again. The cold breath of the cellar drifted up to meet them, tinged with dust and the faint smell of old timber. Noah held the flashlight tightly, its beam slicing through the shadows as they descended. The cellar felt different this time, not just mysterious, but waiting. Amber opened each old crate carefully, her hands moving more confidently than the night before. They worked through stacks of yellowing papers, receipts, and letters. Amber read quietly, absorbing details she had never known her mother negotiating for an extension, writing combat firm letters to the bank, dealing with Rick Dalton's attorneys, fighting back against unjust accusations that she missed payments she had in fact already made. Most of the documents were incomplete fragments of stories, but in the last crate, buried under a brittle blanket, they found a slim folder tied with a faded blue ribbon. Amber opened it slowly. Inside was a stack of pristine papers protected in clear sleeves, untouched by dust, preserved carefully, intentionally. At the top, final ownership and payment confirmation, Collins Cabin Property. On the signature line, her mother's familiar handwriting, curving bold, steady, even though Amber knew she'd been ill. The date was 3 weeks before she died. The contract was stamped, notarized, and sealed by the local county office. Noah's eyes widened. "Mom, this means he was lying." "Yes," Amber whispered, fingers trembling over the embossed seal. "It means everything my mother fought for," she finished. "And Rick Dalton tried to erase that." Amber pressed the folder to her chest, fighting back tears of relief mixed with sorrow. Her mother, even in her final days, had been thinking of her, protecting her. Building a life Amber had been too overwhelmed to imagine. "We're going into town," Amber said with a steady breath. Hours later, after bundling the children into the truck of a neighbor who occasionally passed through the woods, a kind man named Owen Bailey in his 60s, with a gentle voice and the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lifetime fishing the northern lakes. Amber stepped into the Duluth County Courthouse. Owen waited with the children in the lobby, whittling a small piece of wood for Grace with his pocket knife. He was tall and lean, with a silver beard trimmed neatly along his jaw, and eyes that carried the tired wisdom of a man who had seen too many winters. Amber walked alone into the clerk's office. The clerk, Mrs. Helen Marks, was a woman in her late 50s, with round glasses perched at the end of her nose, and a calm, motherly demeanor. Her gray hair was tied in a tight bun, and she had the air of someone who enjoyed keeping things in order and grew quietly offended when others did not. Helen scanned the document slowly, her eyes narrowing. "These signatures," she murmured, flipping pages. "These seals. Everything here is legitimate. Your mother paid every last penny." Amber swallowed. "Then Rick Dalton has no claim." Helen looked up sharply, adjusting her glasses. "None. Not a single inch." Within an hour, Amber stood before Judge Raymond Calder, the county's senior magistrate, a tall, stern man with silver hair combed neatly back, square shoulders that filled his black robe, and a voice deep enough to hush any courtroom. Despite his imposing appearance, his eyes revealed a well-hidden gentleness. Decades on the bench had taught him empathy, even when his expression did not show it. After reviewing the papers, Judge Calder tapped his gavel lightly. "This cabin belongs to Ms. Amber Collins," he declared, his tone final and commanding. "All disputes are settled." In the corner of the courtroom, Rick Dalton stood with his arms crossed, jaw-clenched, eyes burning with frozen fury. His storm-gray eyes flickered with something dark and frustrated, a predator forced into retreat. "You cheated," he began. Judge Calder slammed the gavel harder. "Enough. Leave these people alone, Mr. Dalton. Consider this your final warning." Rick's jaw flexed. For a moment, Amber thought he might ignore the judge and rush toward them. But then, with a snarling exhale, he turned and stormed out of the courtroom, his heavy boots striking the floor like thunder. Owen escorted Amber and the children back to the cabin, his old truck bouncing gently over the snow-packed road. Winter began to soften in the days that followed. The sun lingered longer in the sky. The trees shook loose their heavy coats of frost. The cabin, once a place of fear and uncertainty, became a sanctuary brimming with new life. Noah found tools in the cellar and used them to build a small wooden bridge over the stream behind the cabin. His serious expression softened into pride when he finished it. Grace planted marigolds in clay pots they found under the porch, orange blossoms glowing like little suns in the melting snow. Eli raced around the open yard with Coda close behind him, their laughter and barks echoing between the pines. Amber stood on the doorstep one evening watching the snow melt trickle into the forest floor. The air smelled of pine sap and promise. She placed a hand over her heart and whispered into the glowing dusk, "Mom, I kept your gift safe." A breeze brushed gently across her face, warm for the first time in months, and for that precious moment, Amber felt her mother standing with her. Hope settled into her like a soft, enduring light. Her life wasn't easy now, not yet, but for the first time in years, she had something steady beneath her feet, something she could build on. A home, a beginning, and that alone made her spirit feel weightless. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or bright lights. Sometimes they come quietly like a forgotten cabin in the snow, a folded document preserved by a mother's love, or the soft bark of a loyal dog in the darkest hour. In Amber's journey, we see a reminder that God often works through the smallest, most unexpected doors. He doesn't always move mountains in front of us. Sometimes He strengthens our feet so we can climb them. Her story teaches us that even when the road feels impossible, even when winter seems endless, grace can still reach us exactly where we are. God can use broken things to build something whole again. He can turn fear into courage, loss into protection, and a struggling family into a living testimony of His quiet, steady mercy. And just like Amber, each of us carries battles that no one else can see. But we also carry the chance for new beginnings, a chance planted by faith, watered by hope, and lifted by the gentle hand of God. If this story touched your heart today, I invite you to share it with someone who might need a reminder that miracles still happen. Leave a comment below, tell us where you're watching from, tell us what part of the story spoke to you, or simply type Amen as a blessing over your own life. And if you want more stories of hope, resilience, and God's hidden grace, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. May the Lord bless you, protect your home, guide your steps, and cover your family with warmth today and always. Amen.